Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Love Fruit podcast. And today I'm joined by someone who's got a lot of knowledge and information about fruit and a fruitarian and fruit-based diet, and someone who's an inspiration to many people who's been on that diet for many years now. And that's Anne Osborne. And Anne is not only the author of the book Fruitarianism, The Path to Paradise, but she also works with the Woodstock Fruit Festival, plays a big part in that event, and has been a speaker at events around the world, including the UK Fruitfest a good number of times. Anne is originally from the UK, but now lives in Australia and has brought up two children on a fruit-based diet as well. So, Anne, is there anything else you'd like to tell us about your story, a little bit about you?
Really, I started off as a ethical vegan. I became vegan for ethical reasons and just noticed right at the beginning a huge increase in my health, which I wasn't expecting because I was only 20 and I thought I was reasonably healthy and I wasn't doing it for any kind of health reasons. And that really was the turning point for me to want to find out more about, health and what we eat and that connection. And that kind of led me a few years later to try the fruit diet. And I tried different types of vegan diet. I tried a macrobiotic vegan diet. I tried sort of Anne Wigmore, lots of wheatgrass sprouts, that kind of raw diet. And then when I started the fruit diet, it just worked for me on so many levels, health-wise, environmentally, ethically. And I've just stuck with it ever since. So it's like coming up for 29 years. And I can't think of any other way of eating that for me would work as well as the fruit diet has. So that's why I've stuck with it.
And for me, you're one of the most passionate people I've met about when it comes to the topic of fruit and the fruit diet and the history of the fruit diet and all that kind of stuff. And was that always the case? Did you always have this? Did you know straight away this was going to be a major passion for you when you first found out about it?
I don't know, it was just trying it out because I went to a talk. We had an animal rights group in Leicester and went to a talk by this guy called David Shelley. And I'm just in the process of turning his book into a PDF file, which I'll be able to share with people. So I read his book, heard him talk. He was a great inspiration to me because he looked very well. He had a good energy. And it kind of made sense. When you sort of hear something and it just clicks somewhere, I just thought this just makes sense on so many levels. And when I read his book, about the environmental thing, the ethical thing, the health thing, what our bodies are, designed to digest and thrive on, it made sense. So I started out, and the more I did it, the more interested I became. And I particularly became interested in the history of it because although it's a kind of spiritual thing as well, being on the fruit diet, I like things to make sense. I like things to be rational, and I like the science behind things. So I was also interested in finding out how come people started advocating fruit-based diets, sort of 150 years ago, which kind of led us to where we are now, because we had people like Arnold Ehret, we had people like Gustav Schlickisen, who wrote a very sort of scientific book about why fruit was the ideal food for humans. And he looked very much at our physiology and anatomy to show that we were, by design, frugivores, and compared our anatomy to different types of animals. And so I've just got sort of led on this journey, and I'm really interested in old books, old natural hygiene information, because I think there's a lot of simple truths in there. And I think if something is the truth, it's that it was written 200 years ago or, last week. And these truths hold up. So I became interested in finding out more about the scientific basis for a fruit diet, as well as all the other things as well. And newspaper archives as well, I find to be very interesting. So I kind of look at online newspaper archives, which are, readily available now. And there's so many positive things about fruit and the fruit diet, because now often we hear more negative things in the media. And I think the mass media possibly now is more controlled by vested interests and pharmaceutical companies and meat and dairy industries. So it's very hard for articles that go against that your sort of mainstream, allopathic medicine and your sort of like meat and two veg diet. Whereas I think years ago, yes, there were commercial interests in newspapers, but less so. So I think there's some very useful information in there, and there was less bias. Now, often if there's something put in about a fruit diet, there'll be something by a dietitian to say, well, actually, we don't think this is very good. Whereas you didn't tend to get that. You didn't get the dietitians coming out and saying, 150 years ago, well, no, this isn't a good diet.
That's actually a great point, Anne, because you're right. Like some of those articles you've shared, and I've read some of them, they are very positive about the idea, almost like it seems kind of a common sense idea to people back at that time, and now it seems there's been just a generation of misinformation coming from the food industry, which has just changed things completely.
And the whole processing, processed foods, yes, there were some processed foods 150 years ago, but nowhere like, and there wasn't the, sort of the fast food kind of restaurants. So, it was very different in that respect.
Yeah.
And I also think it's interesting because if you think 150 years ago, the access most people had to fruit was very, very different to what we have now. If we go in the UK or Australia, you go into a supermarket and you can get such a huge range of fruits. If you go into the Chinese area in a town,
Sure.
You can get durian, rambutans, all sorts of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the average person, 150 years ago in a temperate climate would be lucky if they got a banana or a pineapple. It'd be something really special.
Sure.
But it was still advocating, fruit diets then. But one thing I think is probably the quality of the fruit 150 years ago would be very different because the soils would be a lot better. There'd be less hardly any chemical fertilizers. There wouldn't be all the sprays and stuff. So I think to counteract the variety maybe we get today, the actual quality of the fruits would have been superior 150 years ago because the soils were built up. Now I think it is put so high up and so important in most commercial farming that often the quality of the soil is overlooked, in terms of how much yield we can get or how big, the crops are. And farmers are paid according to size and weight of their produce, which leads them to grow big, heavy fruits, but not necessarily fruits that have got high micronutrient content in, which I think, is really, really important. I think it's pretty easy if you've got the money and if you've got, the resources, to get your macronutrient needs met on a fruit diet. I think where we may be challenged is the micronutrients, so your vitamins, your minerals, and your antioxidants. We might be challenged in that because the soils don't have those things in, they don't have the minerals in. Yes, it's easy, you can get sweet fruit. It's not just about the sweetness of a fruit because the sugar content depends on photosynthesis. So if a fruit plant gets a lot of sunlight and it's got water and it's got carbon dioxide, it will create sugars. And if it's left to ripen properly, it can be really sweet. But looking at the other end, the roots, which are in the soil, and it's the soil that provides the micronutrients, if that's deficient, you can still think, oh, this fruit tastes really sweet, it tastes really good, but it might not necessarily contain the micronutrients, we need, because if the nutrients aren't in the soil, then they're not going to get into the plant. They don't magically alchemize in the plant if they're not in the soil. So I think that's an important thing. It's not just the sugar content of a fruit. Obviously, that's important. You don't want to eat a sour mango, but it's also the micronutrient content that we can't always taste. Sometimes we can, we taste a piece of fruit and it just tastes so good. Some berries, they taste really nutritious, but we've got to look at sugar content and micronutrient content, I think, to ensure that we get good quality fruit.
Yeah. So when you were kind of starting off, how was it for you back when you started? Was it did you find it quite difficult? Obviously, there probably wasn't a lot of people doing it. What do you think kind of inspired you to keep going with it?
I think I was fortunate in two ways. One, that there was about 6 or 7 friends. We all started out on the fruit diet together. So we had that kind of social support. And the second thing is that we could access really good quality organic fruit. So we set up a fruit buying group and we bought from a wholesaler in Leicester, and we were getting really, really great fruit. We were getting mangoes from Egypt, beautiful Italian apricots, grenadilla from Burkina Faso, and all the quality of the fruit was great. And because we had a buying group, we could afford to buy, say, 6 or 7 different boxes of fruit a week, divide it up, so we had the variety, and the quality was outstanding. And I think having that really good quality led me into the simple fruit diet. I didn't get into any kind of raw gourmet or prepared dishes. or complex salads, because right from the beginning we were ordering boxes of organic fruit, and they were so good and so tasty. There was no desire to mix them with anything else. So I think we had that access to good quality fruit, which is vital. And also we had the social support of like 6 or 7 people all starting out and all being enthusiastic, because when you start out on something and it works for you and you feel really good and it's kind of exciting. So I think that really helped me at the beginning, the social support and the access, to good quality fruit.
And you were obviously living in the UK for the majority of the time, really, that you've, or a lot of the time that you've been on a fruitarian diet. And I guess, as you say, you did the buying. But did you grow any of your own fruit? Were you able to forage or do anything like that?
I had an allotment, which people will know what an allotment is in England, where it's like a piece of land that you rent and you grow stuff on. So part of that time I had an allotment, so I grew some things like raspberries, strawberries, gooseberries, but not a lot of growing of my own stuff because I didn't have a big garden. When I was in Leicester, I had a garden that was so small that I used to cut the grass with a pair of scissors. So, I didn't really have any room to grow stuff. I did, honestly. I used to go out and cut it with a pair of scissors because it was tiny. It was a little terraced house, like Coronation Street. It's all tiny. It had a bit of grass, but not much. So, yeah, I used to sort of like, did have an allotment for a period of time, which is a great idea. I think if anybody's in the UK and they want to grow more fruit and veggies, in those days, it was like about £5 a year to rent, a plot, and you can grow a lot of stuff on an allotment plot. And also, I think what's really good about allotments is you get a lot of people there that have got a great knowledge of growing fruit, and they share it all with you, and you can pick up tips and stuff. And it's just like a really nice community thing. It's like a big community garden, but you've got your own personal space in it. But I used to forage quite a bit. I mean, there's things, cherries. Probably around this time of year, maybe a little bit later in the UK, there's a lot of wild cherry trees, but they're good tasting cherries that councils have put in because they're a pretty tree and they flower nicely. Later in the season, blackberries. And blackberries are really, really good fruit. They're really high in calcium, really high in micronutrients. I think in one of your quizzes in the UK Fruit Festival, one of the questions was, what's the most nutritious fruit? And I think the answer was blackberries. I seem to remember one of your fruit quizzes, something like that. Anyway, so there's a lot of forageable fruit, and if you've got a freezer or if you've got a dehydrator, if you're foraging a lot of berries or fruits, then there's too much to eat at that time. You can always freeze them. Blackberries freeze really well. Freeze them and then have them in the times of the year when you can't access them. Apples as well. You can store apples for like 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
If you store them correctly. I've done that in the UK. You get a box, you make sure they've got no blemishes on, because if one's got a blemish, they'll all go rotten. Wrap them up individually in newspaper and store them somewhere dark and cool, a garage or a shed, somewhere where they don't get damp. And you can store apples like for, get late in apples, you can store them until the spring.
Yeah, and
so there's things you can do.
It's one of those things that I think that once again, the memory of it's been lost, that before processed food, before all these things, that orchards were common in towns, in the plans of towns. If you look at old towns, and even in England and parts of Europe, there's orchards all over the place, and you can look now, go into towns and you see roads and streets that are Orchard Street and Orchard, and these are all ancient sites of like old orchards. So people have forgotten how much. I think we've forgotten how much fruit was actually a part of the diet. And as you're saying, strategies like growing fruits and developing fruits over the years that lasted the winter, basically, that could be stored for almost the entire winter and then continued to be eaten virtually into the next year, is something that people have completely lost the memory of. And it's interesting with I think I saw a couple of years ago, there was a change in the EU laws, and they weren't going to subsidize like farmers that if you had a field and it was full of fruit trees, they weren't going to get some money for it or whatever it was. So this was going to force a lot of farmers to cut down all these trees. And they were saying that like this was ancient orchards and these trees that had rare varieties that could be very useful to us in the future. We don't know what the genetics of those varieties would have, and a lot of that's been lost. So it's kind of a real shame. But
Yeah. And
yeah.
And I think what you say about varieties, the varieties of apples in the UK, like every town had their own variety of apple.
Sure.
The one in Leicester was actually Annie Elizabeth, which is kind of strange. But yeah, each town had their own variety of apple, and there was such a huge amount of heirloom apples. And there are some places, like where they're coming back. I think some of the supermarkets are trying to bring some of the heirloom varieties back. I've got a friend, and he used to work in it was the biggest organic apple orchard, and it was in Worcestershire, I think.
Right.
And the amount of varieties, he brought me a box once of about 20 different apples, each with a little name. He'd written the name in cardboard on, all these old, beautiful varieties. And whether that orchard's still there or not, I don't know. But, things like that are really interesting because they show that there was a huge amount of variety in fruit. And like you say, if those varieties are gone, we don't know that some apples might have had a really good, sort of nutrient content for copper or iron or whatever,
A lot of fruitarians don't really rate apples very highly, but I think they're kind of an underrated fruit. I think you can have a really good meal of apples.
Yeah, I love apples. I think because people have never had good apples. They've had apples that are really spongy or underripe, and they've been stored for like 2 or 3 months in a cold storage.
Sure.
But if you have a really good Cox's orange pippin or an Egmont russet, the russet apples, that's nutty, really, really tasty. And they're still available, I think, in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely,
over time, the russets. So there are really good apples if they're properly ripe. But again, with fruit, they're not properly tree ripened and they're picked too early, and you never get a really, really good apple. But yeah, I did I think the first mono diet I did was apples. I did 2 weeks on apples, and that was great. I had organic apples, these beautiful golden delicious, which I've never had a nicer apple, I don't think. I still remember them. I had a crate of them, a crate of another type of apple, and just did it for 2 weeks, and it was wonderful.
Yeah, I have a friend that he kind of sells fruit trees in Scotland, and he sells a lot of the old kind of heritage varieties. And he organises an apple day in the Scottish Parliament. So he brings all these different varieties of apple in. And I remember I went in with him one time, and I tried a few strange varieties. One of them was almost like alcoholic or something. It was very, very strong taste. But I think, I think that people underrate, unfortunately, and a lot of people, like, they have an apple tree in their garden, they just assume that it's bad. I went to this. He asked me to go and help collect apples from this couple's garden, and I said to them, "What are the apples like?" And they said, "We've never tried them. Our friend told us they weren't very good." So I tried one, and I was like, "That's an excellent apple. What you've got like 300 free apples. You've never bothered to taste them." So so let's talk about monodiets, because you brought it up there. What exactly is a monodiet?
A monodiet is where you go on one type of fruit for a certain period of time. It could be 2 days, it could be 2 weeks, it could be 2 months. And you just eat that type of fruit. So whether it's melons, mangoes, peaches, apples, and the length is up to the person. Some people just like to do a couple of days, some people will go for longer. And the reasons that people do a monodiet are quite varied. I think probably the biggest one is for health and healing. But sometimes people just want a bit of a reset. I think, people could maybe get jaded or get this idea that they're being deprived of something if they're on a fruit-based diet.
Sure.
If you go on a monodiet for a week, and then when you stop, you see the huge variety of fruit you can actually eat. But like, you won't be complaining about, I can't have this, I can't have that. It's like, well, I can have this, I can have that. Also, some people go on monodiets just to simplify their life, that you're not thinking about what am I going to eat. You've ordered your fruit in, you've got it. It simplifies things, and it frees up energy for other stuff. And I think as well, sometimes if people are going through emotional issues or crises, then simplifying your diet gives you more energy to deal with whatever else is in your life, which is taking a lot of your energy. So I think that's kind of useful. I think with the healing side of it, I think water fasting is really good, really effective, but it has to be done properly. ideally supervised if you're going over more than a few days, unless you've had previous experience of water fasting. And some people can't water fast because they can't afford to take the time off work, or they've got responsibilities like children, or even if they're just doing it, a few days at home, it's difficult for them if their energy levels get low, if they've got young children or other responsibilities. But I think when you go on a mono diet, you can kind of regulate the elimination. With a water fast, you can't really. Arnold Ehret said, when you water fast, you're on God's operating table, meaning that you don't really know exactly what's going to happen. You don't totally on a mono diet, but with a mono diet, you can regulate the elimination. And there's been doctors who've done a lot of mono diets with patients to resolve a lot of different health issues, and they've tended to have small amounts of the fruit that they're mono dieting on, because it's more like a camouflaged fast. But if you're on a mono diet and you're having a smaller amount and you're finding you're eliminating too much, you can increase the amount you eat. So you've got more control over elimination, because if you're not doing a mono diet for any acute healing reasons, and you want to have a lot of energy, or you're very busy, and you'll find that the elimination will tend to go down. So I think that's very useful, that anybody can mono diet really. You don't have to be supervised. You can regulate the amount of elimination because you can regulate the amount you eat. So you've got more choices there. And it can be, very economical. I know when I go on an orange juice diet and I have organic oranges, and it's still like a fraction of what I'd normally spend on fruit. So even though I'm not doing it for economical reasons, that's a kind of side effect, and it does free up a bit of money for other things.
Do you think it's a good tip? Do you think it's a good transition for a beginner, or do you think a mono diet is something that someone should try once they've got a bit more experience with a fruit diet?
I think a lot depends on your state of health. If you're a pretty healthy person and you've not taken many recreational drugs or many allopathic drugs, and you've generally had a kind of whole food diet with a lot of plant foods in, then I think a mono diet would be a pretty good diet to go on. If, however, you've got a lot of health issues, you've got a lot of maybe drugs, residues, toxins in your system, you might find that a mono diet is too much to start with. So I think you've really got to look at the individual, their past health history, and where they currently are in their level of health. And then within mono diets, I think there's differing levels of aggressiveness of cleansing. I think orange juice can be quite aggressive. I think oranges can really stir up toxins. A lot of people find that an orange juice diet is almost as cleansing as a water fast.
Sure.
But then something like apples tends to be more gentle. I think as well with apples, you've got a lot of pectin in the apples. So that acts like a broom in the intestines. So it also gives you a bit of a physical elimination, as well as the chemical elimination that's happening, because you're, letting your body do some detox. And I think apples tend to be more gentle. I think melons tend to be more gentle. So I think often it depends on the fruit. If you want a more aggressive mono diet, then, citrus is probably the one to go for. But if you want something more gentle and you're a beginner to it, something like apples, or you're doing mangoes, I think mangoes are quite a good one, because they don't tend to be so aggressive in terms of cleansing as, say, oranges. But grapes, again, grapes can be quite aggressive, and they can really sort of stir up stuff. But I think it's when you decide to do a mono diet, it's what you are attracted to. If you're really attracted to grapes and you can access good quality grapes, then go for grapes. There's no set fruit, this is better than the other. They're all good in their own way, and a lot depends on your individual needs. If you're really attracted to orange juice and it works for you, maybe orange juice is the mono diet for you at that particular time. Some people say to me, I don't know how you can do oranges, they don't work with my stomach, I get skin issues, this and that. Well, then don't do oranges. Find what works for you if you want to do a mono diet. Maybe it's grapes, maybe it's apples, maybe it's pears. Pears is a nice gentle mono diet, I think, to do, and not too expensive and accessible for most people in temperate countries.
So there is, you do feel, in your experience, you've felt differences with different mono diets and fruits? Yeah. Interesting, yeah.
And notice different benefits. Yeah. One thing was interesting with grapes. I've done a couple of grape mono diets, and my pulse went really down. I think it went to 42, which is pretty low for me, both times. And I thought it was a kind of a quirk. So when I did the next grape mono diet, I did it again, and I haven't noticed that on any other mono diet. I find if I don't want to lose weight, then Melons is a good one for me, or papaya. Both of them, even when I'm not really eating huge amounts, I don't tend to lose any weight.
Yeah.
Orange juice, I will lose a bit of weight. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I think it depends on, you know, what your goals are. If you don't want to lose any weight, then maybe go for something a bit more substantial, you know, like mangoes or melons, where you can, you know, get the calories up. But if you're not bothered about losing a bit of weight, then orange juice, you know, might be
Excellent.
better
Yeah.
for you if you want to lose weight, you know.
And you talk about some of your modern diets in your book, just in case
Mm.
people want to learn more about it, and they can find your book. And I've actually got your book here. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to show it to everyone. Sorry about that. Yeah. So here's Anne's book. If anyone's watching the video version. I think this is quite a rare book now to try and get, though, and there's not many people. I don't think you've got any. They're not in print anymore.
No, I stopped getting printed because I got really busy and I was like busy with work school and everything, and I decided not to get another printing for a while. But I do have a PDF copy, so if anybody emails me at fruitbatann@yahoo.com, Anne with an E, then I can send you a free PDF copy. I do plan to get more hard copies, but the printer that I used to use, which was a green printer, they're not working at the moment. And it was important for me to use a green printer, so it was like non-toxic inks and good paper, and the whole factory was powered by, you know, renewable energy, because I didn't want them to get printed somewhere where the workers had poor conditions or the inks were toxic. So that is something that I'm thinking about, finding another green printer and getting some more hard copies.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the meantime, PDF copies available free.
Yeah, people love this book, and yeah, it's definitely encourage you to get a copy if you're listening. So I'd like to ask you about, once just staying with where you started in the UK. I believe that there was a newsletter at the time called the Fresh Network, which I think stood for Fruitarian, Raw, something. I'm not sure exact, but
support and help, I think. Was
right.
it Fruitarian, Raw, Eating, Support and Health? Oh, that's what I don't know, but something like that. Yeah.
So that's a little bit before my time of being in the raw food thing. But back then, was that a newsletter, and did they have events and other things that were helpful to you?
Yeah, no, that was great, because in those days it was like pre-internet, and you waited and waited to get in the post. You got the Fresh Network news, which was like photostated. I think it went quite sort of glamorous later on and went sort of colour pictures and proper printing. But when I first joined, it was just like photostated. And there was the Fruitarian Network news from Renee up in North Queensland.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd be so excited to get them, because you'd get them sort of, I don't know, about 4 times a year. And there was a list of members in them, so you could contact people, you know, by post or phone. That was how we connected back in the day. But yeah, they had some really interesting articles in, and it was just really inspiring to connect with other people, because there wasn't the internet. Now I think most people who are on, you know, fruit-based diets connect with each other via the internet, but this was pre-internet. And there would be events. They had a place called Hales, and Susie Miller was one of the first people that organised the Fresh Network news. I think she was the editor, and she had this place at Hales, and there were a lot of people going there. And Tony Wright was doing his sleep deprivation experiments there one time, which was quite funny, because there was like a raw gathering plus the sleep deprivation. So you'd be talking to someone and suddenly they'd go like that, and they said, wake us up if we go to sleep. So you'd be talking with someone and they'd just go like that, and then you'd have to sort of shake them awake, and it was like really kind of funny. But yeah, so Tony Wright was doing all that at the time. But yeah, it was all like kind of pre-internet. But we did have meetings, but obviously not as often, and sometimes you'd meet up with people in your local area. And as I said before, I was fortunate that was about 6 or 7 of us that started out in Leicester together. So we, you know, we'd meet up and we'd, you know, share our fruit, and we'd have that social stuff. And we were also all involved in animal rights, so we'd, you know, be doing animal rights stuff together, but we'd be, you know, bring our fruit along instead of our veggie burgers. So,
sure.
Yeah.
So when did the move to Australia take place, and was that quite an easy choice to make?
It wasn't really, because I left my kind of family back home in England, so that was a difficult thing. But you know, I was excited to move to Australia, and I thought it's probably a more conducive climate to being on a fruit diet. Because what I found is when I lived in the UK, there was really good fruit. I think the fruit availability in Leicester was excellent. There was supermarkets, Waitrose was good. You'd even get really, at that time, you'd get Californian avocados in Sainsbury's. And more diversity, I think. Now I think all the avocados just about come from Peru or South Central America. But at that time, there was huge diversity in just things like avocados. There was also Leicester Market, which is a huge covered market. There was all the ethnic shops, the Asian shops, a lot of Indian and Pakistani shops in Leicester, West Indian shops. So, you know, I never really found it an issue getting good fruit all year round, although it was obviously better in the summer because you got all the European melons and stuff, but then in the winter you did get some stuff from, you know, South America and South Africa. The South African stuff was always, you know, really, really top quality. But I think it was missing the sun. And I think the more I think about it, that being somewhere in England in the winter is an issue in terms of your vitamin D, because vitamin D is so essential for a good immune system, for feeling well, for hormonal system. And there's other things that we get from the sun as well. And there was a period when I lived in Penzance during the winter, and Penzance is about the sunniest place in the UK because it's right, you know, near Land's End, southwest Cornwall. And when you looked in the newspaper to say the sunniest place in England today, it was always Penzance, just about 9 times out of 10. And I never got any desire to go abroad when I lived in Penzance. And I think a lot of it is the sun. And when we're on a standard vegan diet, we're getting vitamin D in terms of a lot of foods are fortified with it. You know, if you get a burger mix, or if you get soy milk, if you get cereals. But when you go to totally non-processed food, when you just go to fruit and veggies, you're not getting any vitamin D through your diet unless you're supplementing. And if you're not accessing good sunshine, which you can't get enough sunshine in the UK in the winter to actually produce vitamin D because the sun isn't strong enough and the angle's not right. I think that was probably why I got a desire to go abroad most years, you know, for a couple of months to just get the sunshine rather than the fruit. All the fruit was brilliant, you know, but it wasn't just about the fruit. And then going to Australia was great because I could eat local fruit, you know, all year round. Where I live, there's good local fruit. It's easy to grow stuff and it grows so much quicker than the UK. You know, you can plant a tree from seed. I was planting some chocolate sapotes, and from seed to fruit was 4 years, which is, you know, pretty good. And the sunshine, getting good weather all year round, I think was really beneficial. But I still think, you know, it's possible to be on a fruit-based diet anywhere in the world, maybe not Antarctica, but just about anywhere in the world, if you can access good fruit, which you can, I think. I mean, do you find that you can access good quality fruit all year round if you're in the UK?
Yeah, I think I honestly think it's a bit of a mindset thing as well. Like if you believe, if you choose that that's what you're going to find, then you will find it. And even if it's only 1 or 2 or 3 varieties that you think are really good, I think that that's plenty, you know. Whereas a lot of people will say, well, oh, these apricots aren't ripe or whatever. It's like, well, it's kind of December, you know, they probably aren't going to be ripe. So I don't really focus on that. I just focus on the stuff that is good. And I think it's one of those things that you develop. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, but almost like a sixth sense of what's going to be good or what's ripe. So you walk into a fruit shop, you can kind of quickly scan over it and go, right, that's the good thing there. And all that stuff I'm not even going to bother looking at right now, you know. That's how I feel.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. Like fruit picking skills, they get better. The more you eat fruit, the more you're attracted to fruit, the more it's kind of attracted to you. And you know the signs, and you store it all up in your brain. You know, what this type of mango, you know, what colour should it be? What shape should it be? How should it feel in your hand? And you've got all that information, but just visually, you, like you say, you can look round and you can say that looks good, or that. You can pick the best mango on the pile or the best melon on the shelf. And then there's tips, things like, you know, big bottoms for melons, and, you know, long necks for avocados. There's lots of little tips, but I think, it's just the instinctive thing. I think any animal has an instinct when it comes to food. if you get a cat and it's been brought up as an orphan and it's never seen another cat, it still knows how to catch its own natural food. There's still that instinctive thing. I think humans have lost a lot of instinct. I think that's one thing that's sort of gone away with us. But I think when we get into our kind of natural diet and more of a natural lifestyle, instinct is there, because we'd have to have had an instinct. If we believe that we were frugivores, if we believe that thousands of years ago we were foraging in forests and getting fruit as our main sort of nutrient source, then we'd have to have an instinct for it. We'd have to develop skills of fruit picking. And what's interesting is that with figs, there's certain types of monkeys now that can feel a fig to see whether it's ripe or not. And they've got a huge advantage, because most monkeys will just pick each fig off, taste it. If it's not ripe, throw it away. So it's a lot quicker. The monkeys that can actually feel the ones that are ripe and only pick the right ones get a lot more food in a shorter period of time. So there's the natural frugivores, of which I believe humans are, we do have instinctive fruit picking skills. And I think we kind of reactivate them a bit. And also it's new knowledge as well, because the more we're sort of going into fruit shops, the more we're trying things, and we might try an orange that looks this way, well, that's sour. Try an orange that looks that way, that tastes good. And we retain that information because it's a survival thing as well. Well, years ago it would have been a survival thing. If we couldn't pick good fruit, we would have died.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I've got that monkey touch that you're talking about. So I like to quickly feel. And I think that's something that people don't get, because people sometimes rely a little bit too much on, are the bananas got brown spots or have this, it's like, well, you give it a little touch as well and see. It could be a bit different, So, but yeah, that's something that I find interesting, is that the more you think about it, like everything about humans is related, that you can trace it back to fruit in some way. I think about the way our memory works. I think you were just kind of talking about that there as well, like the ability to memorize big geographies, and the fact that we don't get up in the morning and chase our food, because our food doesn't run about. So we just need to know what it is, and we can just remember where it is, so we can go and find it. And so the way that I look at that in the modern world is that you could ask anyone, and most people would know like 100 restaurants they could go to in their city. They know exactly how to get there, and exactly what's there. They know exactly the memories and how to get. So it's like human memories related to picking fruit and our hands, eyesight, and everything.
And an interesting study was done by this woman, Dr. Catherine Milton, in South America. And she was looking at monkeys, and she looked at two types of monkeys, the howler monkey and the spider monkey. And the spider monkey was a similar size. They were both a similar size, both of these monkeys. And they didn't kill any monkeys because they were nice people. But if they found a dead monkey, they'd take it away and do an autopsy. Now, the howler monkey, its main diet was leaves. The spider monkey, its main diet was fruit. And what they found was, when they looked at the brains of these monkeys, and the monkeys had a similar sort of height, they had a similar body mass, that the brain of the fruit-eating monkey was twice as big as the leaf-eating monkey. Which makes sense, because if you're in the tropics where there's always leaves, you don't need to know where the leaves are, when they're going to be in season. They're everywhere. But if you're a fruit-eating creature, you need to know what fruit's in season at what time and the location of it. So, each fruit has its season, whether it's the mangoes, the figs, the durian, the cempedak, but also the location. So you've got to have like the geography plus the time, and you need more brain for that. So fruit-eating animals do tend to have bigger brains, and then you get the thing like, we've got bigger brains because we had to have bigger brains because we ate meat, and the meat-eating developed our brains. But if you look at this research on the monkeys, but it's not that at all. We've got bigger brains because we're fruit eaters, not because we eat meat, because we need to have all this knowledge about geography and time, this sort of like multi-leveled information about where the fruit is and when it's ripe. And also with the eyes, we have brilliant colour stereoscopic vision as humans, because we need to spot ripe fruit in the trees. And fruit, when it's ripe, it changes colour, so we can see it we can see the reds, the oranges, the yellows against the green leaves. We get very little blue fruit because it's harder to find. It's more advantageous for the plant to have a fruit that when it's ripe, when it's green, it's not seen, because the plant doesn't want us to eat that fruit until it's ripe. So when it's ripe, the colour comes on the skin and we can see it. Now, a cat has very poor colour vision because a cat's food moves, but a cat has very good vision for movement. So, you know, if you see a cat, it can see something move, like right down the bottom of the garden, a little mouse will move, you can't see anything, the cat's there, you can see it. But if you, in terms of colour vision, or if you put something under the cat's nose, it can't often see it because it relies on vision, because its food moves. Our food doesn't move in that way. So yes, I think opposable thumbs, when you look at every part of our body, our anatomy, it fits in with eating a predominantly fruit-based diet. And that's what I kind of like about it. I like that science. I like looking at the research that went on 100 years ago, 150 years ago, where people were looking at our anatomy, our physiology. And that was in a time when nobody was saying we should be eating fruit, we're frugivores. And these were people that, you know, looked purely at the biology, the anatomy and the physiology, and came to conclusions after comparing our teeth, our digestive system, the way our hands move, all these kind of, you know, physiological things that really were the same or very similar to frugivorous anthropoid apes. So there is a very...
It's interesting you brought up Catherine Milton, because I've actually been emailing her back and forth trying to get an interview with her to try and ask her some more about that stuff. When it comes to, you know, more about the science around this, because there are a lot of people that get into this, that hear about this, and they want to hear the science and everything. And I think it'd be fair to say there's not a great deal of science on studies on people eating a fruitarian or a raw food diet for long periods of time. There's not a great deal, and certainly fruitarian only diets is probably not, or you can let me know if there is more.
Have you heard of Professor Mayer in South Africa? B. Mayer, I think it was.
Right,
in the 70s.
Right, yeah.
He did quite a few studies on people on a fruit diet and how they performed athletically. And he's got a book that I have, but there was also a paper released in a sort of a magazine. And I think I've got the magazine somewhere as well. But yeah, he did studies at the University of Pretoria, I think it was. And he had people on a fruit-based diet and they did really, really well. So that was, but I can't imagine nowadays any university or anybody funding for university research on people on fruit-based diets, because there's too much sort of financial involvement from the pharmaceutical industry, from the meat and dairy. And I think if you did want to do something like that, you'd probably have to do an independent study and find a fruitarian millionaire who would fund your research, because I can imagine it being very hard to get funding for any studies like that nowadays.
I think that the fruit festivals are a good opportunity to do small studies with people that could volunteer, you know, especially people who have never done that diet for a long period of time maybe, and they're coming to the festival for the first time, and you could see, even if you could just track like their weight over the course of a week, or their blood pressure, their heart rate, their blood sugar, a few things, just even a few things like that would be interesting to see the difference, and even a survey of how they felt, because even that can be, there's a lot of studies that are just surveys, you know, like what the person felt like, and you know, all that stuff. But yeah, apart from that, I think it's kind of confusing, because it seems like there's really so much, the scientific idea of all animals eating a diet that's in line with their anatomy seems so obvious. But a lot of people will say, well, look, there's not a lot of other science, that, you know, there's not like a massive library of science on food diets. But do you think it's just about trying it for yourself and having some faith in it?
But I think it's finding the science as well. I think, yes, you've got to have faith, but not blind faith. You can't just say, right, I'm going on this diet and it's going to work for me every day for the rest of my life and I don't need to do anything. I think you've got to have faith that's based on knowledge and research and personal experience, and being mindful every day. Do I feel like I need more fat in my diet, or do I need more calcium, or do I need more of that? How am I doing on it? How am I feeling? Not just having blind faith. I think faith is important, but I think that needs to be backed up by research, science, you know, all sorts of things. networking people, talking to other people, doing your own research. Don't take anybody else's word for it. Look at biology, look at anatomy, look at, who do we resemble? Our anatomy, does it resemble a pig, a dog, a cat, a gorilla, a monkey? What are we closest to? And do your own research. And there is a lot of stuff out there, but it's finding it. There's a lot of older stuff. Newspaper archives are good places for positive stuff about fruit diet, but older works on fruit, natural hygiene. I would look at all the older stuff, look into natural hygiene stuff. People who were researching about fruitarian and fruit-based diets maybe 100, 150 years ago, because they tend to be, not so influenced by things that influence people today. I think scientists are influenced a lot by modern corporations who are funding them today. But I think always do your own research. Don't take what anybody else says for anything. Find out for yourself, get your own knowledge. And when you get your own knowledge, it'll be really sure inside of you, you feel very certain of it. And it's kind of exciting. I always like researching stuff. And what I like is that everything that I've researched has backed up the fact that we are designed to eat a fruit-based diet.
Sure.
And that's not to say I would say everybody has to be on a fruit diet, because some people, they don't want to be on a fruit-based diet. Other people find certain challenges to a fruit-based diet. I never say you should tell everybody what they should be doing, but I certainly think there's the potential for everybody to do well on a fruit-based diet if they're ready for it, if they can access good quality fruit, and if they have like a faith in the diet, based, not a blind faith, but based on, sort of knowledge and experience and research. But yes, and I think it's kind of exciting when you doing this research and think, yes, this makes sense. Why aren't more people reading this? Why isn't this more widely known? And there was that guy, I forget what his name is, but in 71, and he discovered these teeth of an ancient human, and said from the marks on the teeth, from the wear patterns on the teeth, we weren't leaf eaters, we weren't meat eaters, we were fruit eaters.
Yeah.
And that was in the New York Times, I think it was 1971. It was a big story. Why don't we ever hear about that anymore? Why isn't, a lot of things are kind of hidden away. Nobody's saying now, yes, we were fruitarians years ago, or we are fruitarians by design. People will say we're omnivores. And another thing people use a lot is the teeth. They'll say we've got canine teeth. But so are fruit bats. If you look at a fruit bat, nobody can deny that a fruit bat eats fruit, and that's what it eats.
Sure. It
might eat nectar, but nectar and fruit. If you look at the canine teeth of a flying fox, they're massive, and it's the dental structure, not just the canines, the dental structure, that we have exactly the same dental structure. And the dental structure, or the dental formula, is the amount of canines, incisors and molars we have, and the pattern of them in our mouths. And we have exactly the same dental formula as the fruitarian or the frugivorous apes and monkeys. We don't have the same as the omnivores or the carnivores or the herbivores. I don't think we're not herbivores. We don't have 4 stomachs. Yes, we can have some amount of greens in our diet if that agrees with us. But if you look at the dental formula of a cow or a sheep, they have this horny pad on the top. They don't have all the teeth that we do. And teeth is not. People will all say about the canine thing. We're omnivores. We've got canines. Fruit bats. Look at fruit-eating monkeys. We have far similar teeth to them, and they still have canines. You can still have canines and be a frugivore. But that's kind of got hijacked. If you've got canines, you must be meant to eat meat. They're not just for eating meat, canines.
And that takes us on to a good point where I know that you mostly, I believe, consume exclusively fruit diet, which means you don't eat a lot of vegetables, or maybe none at all. I'm not sure, but there's lots of people even in the raw food movement who are very supportive of fruit, but they'll say things like, "Oh, you need to make sure you get vegetables for this, for whatever it is, for minerals or whatever." And I remember there was one raw food teacher that says the most important food in a fruitarian diet is the vegetables. So they were kind of pointing out it's essential to get vegetables, but there seems to be a lot of phobia around fruit and fears around fruit, and there seems to be this expectation that fruit somehow is deficient in some way. Where does your kind of confidence come to eat a fruit diet without vegetables?
Well, I think one thing is that fruit is the only food that the plant freely gives us. Plants, unless they're triffids, they can't move. And one huge problem with plants, because they can't move, is how do they get their seeds to spread? Because they don't want the babies growing next to the parent fruit tree or the fruit bush, because they'll be competing for nutrients in the soil, for light, for space. They want their fertilized seeds to be moved away. So there's various ways that the plant will do that. One thing is by wind, which is great, you know, for dandelions or sycamore, little whirly things that come down. But if you've got a big seed like a durian seed or a mango seed, you need a sort of like a cyclone to move the seeds away. There's water, coconuts, you know, that's why coconut palms often grow by the sea, because when the coconut's ripe, it'll fall off and it'll get carried along in the sea. And the third method is animals, either on the coat of an animal like a burr or a spiky thing or a sticky thing, or the animal eating the fruit and spreading the seeds. So plants put a huge amount of nutrition and energy and time into creating fruit which is designed for animals to eat. And not all fruit is designed for humans to eat. Some berries, it's more advantageous if birds spread them. So some berries are poisonous to humans. You know, we're not the center of everything. Not every fruit is meant for us to eat. But the fruit that is meant for us to eat, when it's properly ripe, doesn't have toxins in, because that would defeat the object. If a plant wants us to spread its seeds, it doesn't want us to get poisoned doing so. It doesn't want to put toxins. It wants to put good nutrients in there, so we find that fruit delicious, and we come back year and year, again and again, to eat that particular fruit from that tree and spread its seeds. So fruit that's designed for humans, and not all fruit is, and is perfectly ripe, is not toxic to humans. And some fruit, if it's underripe, can be very toxic. Ackee can kill people if it's underripe. Chocolate sapote and astringent persimmon can taste very, very bad. They have a lot of tannins in if they're not properly ripe. Again, that makes sense on a scientific level, because when the fruit is properly ripe, the seeds are fully viable. And the tree or the plant doesn't want us eating its fruit before its seeds are properly viable, because if it's put all that effort into creating the seeds and then we take the fruit away when it's unripe, that's no good. So if it puts something in that makes that fruit inedible until those seeds are fully viable, that kind of makes sense. So fruit, it doesn't have any toxins in. Fruit that's designed for humans to eat. Every other food has some kind of toxin in. So if we're looking at leaves, leaves may be valuable on many levels. They may contain a lot of minerals, but they also contain some anti-nutrients, you know, oxalic acid or whatever else, or tannins. And animals that eat a lot of leaves develop strategies for dealing with those toxins. So for instance, some kinds of tapirs will go to a clay lick. They'll lick clay, and the negative ions in the clay combine with any positive ions, which are toxins, and it takes them out of the body. And it's similar with charcoal. There's certain monkeys in parts of the world where there are charcoal sellers, where they use charcoal for fuel, and they will steal charcoal from the charcoal sellers and eat it. And those monkeys have a lot of leaves in the diet, mango leaves and other types of leaves that are high in tannins, and that helps get those toxins out of the body. The charcoal, and even today in hospitals for a lot of poisoning, they'll give you activated charcoal to get rid of the poison. So that's what the monkeys are doing. They're eating the activated or the non-activated charcoal, but the charcoal that the sellers are selling, well, they'll steal it to get rid of the toxins. And that's why you know, some people that eat a lot of leaves will say, rotate your leaves. If you're eating a lot of kale, or if you're eating a lot of spinach, rotate it because of the toxins in it. Seeds have anti-nutrients in, because again, the plant doesn't want you to eat its seeds. If you eat all its seeds, then you know it won't be able to grow the new babies. The roots, tubers, have certain toxins in, because again, a plant has to protect itself. Plants are really intelligent, really clever. They have a lot of defense mechanisms to stop themselves being eaten by animals, because everything wants to survive, but what they do want is their fruit to be spread. So one reason I have confidence in fruit, because logically, to me, scientifically, rationally, it's the one food that is, we have a symbiotic relationship with. The plant provides us with the fruit. In exchange, we spread the seeds. And that to me is a really beautiful relationship. With any other part of the plant, we're taking away a part of the plant that the plant would rather we didn't take away. Because if it's the roots, the plant will die. If it's the leaves and we take too many leaves, it won't be able to photosynthesize and it will die. So that really, for me, that whole symbiotic relationship to me makes sense, that fruit, if it's designed for humans, if it's perfectly ripe, is the only food really that doesn't have toxins in it. But having said that, I'm not saying that everybody should just eat fruit. Some people might not be able to get the nutrients they need from fruit. They might feel that they feel a lot better if they eat greens, or if they eat certain types of vegetables to get more calcium or more of certain types of nutrients. And I think you really have to listen to your own body. You're your own best teacher. And if you feel like eating a lot of greens, and if they agree with you and you feel good with greens, then I wouldn't say don't eat greens.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if you have no attraction to greens, if you can access really great quality fruit, and you feel well, and you're, you know, sort of like you're not breaking bones, and you're sort of like you're strong and you've got energy and your immune system's working well, then maybe yes, you can get all your nutrient needs met on a fruit diet. I'm not saying everybody can, I'm not suggesting that everybody should, but I do certainly think that it's possible for some people to do that, providing the fruit is of good quality and it's grown in good soil. Because if the soil is no good, the micronutrients, they don't just magically appear out of the air. We're not going to get things like copper and zinc and iron and selenium and all those things that we need to thrive and be really healthy. But if we can access good, great quality fruit grown in great quality soil and picked ripe, then I think certainly it's possible to have a fruit-only diet, or a very high fruit diet. And people will say, well, you know, look, there's no other animals that eat just fruit. But some animals will eat very, very high fruit, and often it depends on their location. There's a book that I've got, and I can't remember the people that did the study, but it's in this vegetarian book, and it looks at chimps, and there were two lots of chimps being studied. One group of chimps ate 90% fruit, which is pretty high. The other group at much lower percentage, and that was purely geographical, because the chimps that ate the 90% fruit could access really good quality fruit. The other group couldn't, so they made their diet up more with other things. So often, you know, it's geography of an area. If you've got chimps living in an area where they can access, you know, Chempedak, really good quality fruits, they'll be eating mostly fruit. If they're living in an area where there's less quality fruit, they'll be eating more other things in their diet to get the nutrients that they need.
Well, it's interesting because I read something recently as well that they did this with gorillas, and gorillas are seen as more of a vegetarian, like a herbivorous kind of ape. But apparently, even gorillas, if they have the choice, would choose fruit every time over vegetation, which I was kind of surprised by, but I guess it makes sense. But it was like they picked the fruit every single time, and but our ignorance about fruit, like, even seems to head into zoos, where there was a story where they were limiting the amount of fruit the chimpanzees could eat because they would have too much energy or something. It was just strange. Like they're thinking, oh, that high sugar diet is making all the chimpanzees misbehave. You know, it's like, no, they're a chimpanzee. Of course they misbehave. Like, you've got them trapped in a zoo. Like, what do you expect them to do? So, I think that's the most compelling way of looking at it, is looking at the fact that the comparative anatomy is undeniable. Our instincts are undeniably aligned with fruit, and the fact that there's not all these huge studies about it is kind of maybe less important, I guess. But let's talk about the Woodstock Fruit Festival, and when did that come along? You've been working with that for 10 years. Let us know about the story of that.
Yeah, it's the 10th year anniversary this year. I went to the very first Woodstock Fruit Festival, which was in 2011, and Michael Arnstein founded it, and he brought in his friend Julia to help work, you know, with him to create the festival. And they went and looked at places, they found a site to have the festival, they invited speakers, and just got it together. And I think his vision was to bring together people that were normally, you know, not in daily contact, not even in monthly contact with people on fruit-based diets, to bring everyone together, to share, to learn from each other, to have a good time. And that was how it started. And, you know, it was great. The first one was just because nobody had been to anything like it before, really. And then it's been going every year since. And the first year it was at Menla Mountain Retreat, which is near Woodstock, which is why it's got the name Woodstock Fruit Festival. The second year we kind of needed a bigger facility, and so it moved to Camp Walden, which isn't near Woodstock. So, but we kept the name because we kind of like the ethos of the you know, the original Woodstock Festival. And you know, it's kind of grown in number, and a lot of people, you know, go every year. And it's just, I think these festivals are a really good way for people to network and connect and get that connection. And yes, they're good for the educational stuff, and they're great for the fruit and the fitness classes, but I think really importantly that people just connect with each other. And I think, you know, I think hopefully, you know, if the UK festival happens this year, the Woodstock festival happens this year, because everybody's been even more isolated than they normally are. So I think there'd be such a great opportunity for everybody to just say, yes, you know, we're going to connect now, and we're going to all come together and, you know, just have a lot of human contact, which a lot of people, especially if they've been living on their own, it's been very challenging, I think, for a lot of people with that isolation, with limited contact with other human beings.
So you're always,
so yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you're always really busy at the festival, but there's been so many interesting people and speakers and teachers and different events that have happened and all the different fruits. What are some of the highlights that stick out for you over the last 10 years?
Mamie Sapoti from Miami Fruit is a huge one. To be able to eat as much Mamie Sapoti as you want, because normally if you buy it here, or if you buy it in the States, it's like, you know, $10 a pound or whatever, and you know, it's kind of,
Sure.
you can't really afford much of it. But just to have a whole meal of Mamie Sapoti, that's good. I think the first festival, arriving in this van with Yulia, I think, and some other people, and seeing all these people that you'd see on YouTube milling about, and this huge van open up, and there was like 1,000 durian in the back. It was like a movie. It was like if we were doing a movie about sort of like raw vegans, we'd be in it now. And it was just that whole thing, the very first one, the whole first day of like, wow, this is amazing. And then some of the fruit that's been at the Woodstock Festival has been, you know, really, really good. I think, you know, we've had some really interesting speakers. I think Tony Wright's always an interesting speaker, you know, with his ideas on, you know, how we went away from this original Edenic state. And I think really seeing people connect. I think highlights for me is seeing people connect, seeing people come, and you probably notice this on the first day, and you get a lot of solo attendees. They come on their own, they're nervous, they don't know anyone, they're very kind of like this. And then you look on day 3 or 4, they've got a huge group of people they're sitting with, they're having such a great time, you know. And I think highlights for me, people coming and saying, this has been the best life, or this has really changed my life. And you know that even if they never go to another festival, they've had that experience and they've connected with people that will probably be their friends for the rest of their lives. And I think that coming together and just the energy that you get at the festivals, and it's like, you know, your battery's gone down, you've lost that energy over the year, you go to the festivals, whether it's the Danish festival, the UK festival, and suddenly it's like, you're there, and there's all the other people, new people, older people, you know, and you just like feel your battery getting full up. And yeah, so they're really highlights for me. I think that the fact that you've created an event, or you've helped to create an event that changes people's lives and gives them connection with other people, or sets them on a road to a new health. Because you get a lot of people, I suppose you do, not everybody that comes to the festival is even a vegetarian, and we don't mind what diet people are on. They can be on any diet and come to the festival. We just want people to experience for a week of eating fruit, you know, doing fitness activities, seeing how your life can change in just that week, and setting something in motion for people to go away and to take that with them. And it can be really that spark that changes people or gives people that sort of impetus to change their life and change their health, you know, especially if they've got serious health concerns. And I think that's, you know, that's a really valuable part of festivals,
Sure.
is giving people that opportunity to take control of their health. And I think this is something that's really important, especially in the times we're in at the moment, is to realize that we are in control of our own health. And that's something that's been taken away from us. I read this book, The Cancer Prevention Diet, like about 30 years ago. And it was a macrobiotic book, because I was kind of into macrobiotics at the time. So it wasn't even, you know, sort of like raw. But the principles in it were really important to me, because the principles were that we are in control of our health. And if we get ill or if a sickness happens to us, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because it gives us the opportunity to change our health, to realize we're doing something that's not quite right, and to not give our power to doctors or any other health professionals. Yes, they can help us at certain times, but it's our own bodies that heal themselves, and they heal a lot better if we give them the right conditions. And this is the whole like premise of natural hygiene, isn't it? That it's not any homeopathic medicine, any allopathic medicine, it's not any herbal medicine that actually heals us, though aspects of those can help. But what really heals us is our body. And our body strives whatever, even if we're eating McDonald's, even if we never exercise, even if we're smoking and we're drinking, our body still tries to heal and does its best, but often it's thwarted. So if we have a wound, it'll take a lot longer to heal. You know, or if we've got a sort of a chronic health condition, it won't go away. But still, our bodies are always working in our best interest, despite what we do to them. So to sort of have the awareness that we are in control of our health, and that don't give that power away to anybody else, any other, you know, any other health professional, whether they're a sort of an alternative health professional or whether they're very sort of, you know, bog standard, you know, allopathic doctor. But we have control of our health, and to realize that, and to take that power and feel that empowerment, that every choice we make controls our health or affects our health, and not to see things as wrong or right, but to see consequences and things as effective or not effective. If we choose to go for a run, that's going to be pretty effective for our health. If we choose to smoke a cigarette, it's probably not going to be so effective for our health. But you know, every choice we make, not just to say I'm going to put on a face mask or I'm going to sanitize my hands and that's going to protect me. Every choice we make can protect us, or you know, leave us more open to, you know, getting an illness or a disease. You know, would we choose to exercise, to deep breathe, to be out in the sun, to be out in nature, to have positive thoughts, to choose, you know, fresh organic plant-based produce? All those choices are going to protect us. And you know, I think that's something that we can, you know, sort of share with people, so that people don't have fear, that they are empowered about their health, and that they realize that their health can be great if they make certain choices, and not to be fearful that they're going to die from this or die from that, and feel that they have no control over the situation, when in reality we do have a huge control over our own health, you know, and our own health and wellness.
I think that's an excellent message to finish off the interview with there. So, Anne, if people want to learn more from you, of course, they can go to the Woodstock Fruit Festival, and that's the woodstockfruitfestival.com. Is there anywhere else they can follow you or get more information about you?
Yeah, on Facebook, I post a lot of stuff on Facebook. I've got not all my newspaper clippings, but a lot of newspaper clippings. And I think my Facebook is open. Anyone can go and look at it. So it's Anne Osborne, I think Fruit Bat Anne. You probably find me on Facebook. I have got a YouTube channel. I don't do many videos, but that's Fruit Bat Anne as well. And my website is fruitgod.com. So yeah. But yeah, and anybody that's interested in a free PDF copy of my book, if they just email me, my email address is on my website, but it's fruitbatanne@yahoo.com, and I can send you a free PDF copy as well.
Thank you very much for joining me today, Anne, and thank you for listening and watching. Everyone that's been listening, I'm sure you got a lot out of this interview. Let us know if you'd like us to interview Anne again sometime. I know that we've not even covered even half of what she has to share on today's interview. And if you want to learn more about the UK Fruit Fest, you can go to fruitfest.co.uk. thank you for following us in the Love Fruit podcast, and we'll see you in another episode. Speak to you later, Anne. Bye.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Bye.